My daughter-in-law's mother stood in front of the hallway with her arm across the frame and told me I wasn't welcome to walk any further while her side of the family was inside. I looked past her at my own hallway in my own house for a long beat. Then I turned, walked out to the driveway, and dialed my attorney before I'd even gotten the truck started. My name is Walter Brennan. I'm 65, and I spent 29 years overseeing safety inspections and code enforcement for the Cedar Falls Public Utilities Board. For nearly 3 decades, my entire job was catching the small failure before it became the big one. I guess I got so good at watching other people's systems that I stopped watching my own. I retired 3 years back with a decent pension, a house on Maple Ridge that's been paid off since 2018, and one hobby left, which is teasing my wife. Before I walk you through what happened next, drop a comment and tell me where in the world you're tuning in from. I always like to see that. Eleanor and I will hit 36 years married this fall. We got married at her uncle's farm outside Waterloo, folding chairs in the grass, a cousin butchering Ave Maria on a borrowed guitar. We have one daughter, Megan, 33 now. Megan married Trevor 5 years ago, and that's really where this whole story begins to bend. Eleanor is the type of woman who sends a card for every anniversary, every birthday, every minor surgery within a 3-county radius, and who once got a rude contractor to apologize to her in the middle of a hardware store just by asking one quiet, pointed question. She spent 24 years as the office manager at a dental practice, and there isn't a detail alive that gets past her. My closest friend, Pete Ostrowski, and I have known each other 22 years, ever since a rec league bowling team that folded a decade ago. He retired from the county road crew 5 years ago and now spends his days rebuilding snowblowers that were working just fine before he got his hands on them. Life before all this was calm, the kind of calm you don't notice until it's gone. Eleanor's Sunday roasts, Pete wandering in unannounced with a 6-pack and too many opinions, Megan checking in most weeks, less though after she married Trevor, which I told myself was just newlywed life, nothing to read into. Trevor works as a paralegal at a downtown firm called Ashford & Klein that specializes in estate planning. He's 34, meticulous, the kind of guy who alphabetizes his spice rack. When he and Megan got engaged, I had no complaints about him. Polite at the table, curious about my old job, always remembered that Eleanor takes her tea with honey, never sugar. What I didn't find out until almost 5 years in was that he and Megan had poured their savings into a food truck business that expanded into a brick-and-mortar diner downtown. And by last spring, it was bleeding close to $9,000 a month they didn't have. Looking back, the early signs were so minor, I brushed right past them. Back in January, Trevor mentioned during a phone call, real offhand, whether Eleanor and I had ever put together a living trust. I told him no. We'd just had basic wills drawn up years ago by an attorney in town who'd since closed his practice. He said that was worth looking into, that people our age ought to get ahead of it. I said maybe eventually. In February, a woman from a title office phoned our house confirming an appointment neither of us had scheduled. I assumed a mix-up. In March, certain pieces of mail just stopped arriving. Not everything, just a couple of bank statements, which I blamed on the postal service, no offense to Pete's old employer. One afternoon in March, I dropped by their townhouse to return a drill Trevor had borrowed, and I overheard Megan on the porch talking low into her phone, saying she just needed a few more months, that she had it handled, that the diner wasn't going under on her watch. At the time, I only felt bad for her. Now I know exactly what those few months meant, and exactly which bank account was going to fund them. None of these things raised a flag by themselves. I've never been a suspicious man. My whole career, I trusted that procedures existed for a reason and that people generally followed them. That trust is exactly what nearly cost me my house. In May, I stopped into our branch of Heartland Trust to add Eleanor as a joint holder on a certificate of deposit, something I'd been meaning to do for years. The branch manager, Linda Choi, who's handled our accounts for 9 years, pulled up our file and her expression shifted. She said, "Walter, there's a power of attorney on file for this account. Filed back in February." I told her that was impossible, We'd never signed any such thing. She turned her monitor toward me. It named Megan Brennan Cole as attorney in fact for Walter Brennan, with authority over banking, property, and financial matters, notarized on February 9th. I didn't recognize the notary listed. And when I looked closer at the signature, it wasn't mine. Close, but the loop on the W curled the wrong direction. I drove directly to the county recorder's office and requested the file myself. There it was. 5 pages. My name printed neatly at the top, a signature that was almost convincing, and a notary seal under a name I'd never heard. Denise Farrow. Clipped behind it was a second unfiled document, a deed transfer request for the Maple Ridge house, sitting in a queue, waiting for the power of attorney to clear so it could go through. My house, mortgage-free since 2018, one signature away from belonging to someone else. I sat in the parking lot for a long while. I read the notary date over and over like it might correct itself. My hands weren't shaking. They'd just gone completely still on the wheel, like they didn't know their job anymore. That night I called Pete. He answered right away, same as always. I said, "Pete, I think Trevor's wife is trying to take my house." Silence. Then, "Say that one more time." I laid it all out. The POA, the pending deed, the notary I'd never met. He went quiet again, then asked, "Does Trevor know about any of this?" I said I honestly didn't know. He said, "That's going to sting worse than the money does." He wasn't wrong. The next day, I called Renata Cole, an estate litigation attorney Linda had recommended, a woman known for being brutal in a courtroom and pleasant everywhere else. Renata's 49, blunt. With a laugh like a fire alarm she only lets loose once or twice per meeting, always without warning. I handed her the county documents. She scanned them once, set them on her desk, and said, "Walter, this notary doesn't exist. There's no Denise Farrow registered anywhere in this state. Somebody built this from scratch." Renata's strategy had 4 parts. First, file an emergency revocation of the power of attorney with the county, about a week and a half to process, and it would freeze anything pending. Second, subpoena employment records from Ashford and Klein to see if the notary template traced back to software used at the firm. Third, prepare a civil suit for forgery and fraud. Fourth, file a complaint with the State Paralegal Licensing Board, since Trevor's certification carried its own ethics obligations that this clearly violated. She told me we'd hold off on a criminal referral until the paper trail was airtight, because prosecutors need proof, not suspicion. She also told me not to say one word to Megan or Trevor until she gave the signal. I asked how long. She said, 5, 6 weeks. And Walter, I need you to be completely unremarkable for those weeks. No confrontations, just live your life. I tried. Eleanor didn't know the specifics yet, only that something was off, because after 36 years, she can read me like a weather report. And I stopped sleeping well by week 2. I finally told her everything on a Wednesday night at the kitchen table. She went still, then said, in that level, dangerous voice she saves for the rare occasions she's beyond furious, "Get me a copy of that filing." She read it twice and said, "That girl remembers my tea order and forged my husband's signature in the same calendar year." I don't know whether to be angry or impressed. 5.5 weeks later, on a Saturday in late June, Megan and Trevor hosted a family dinner with Megan's parents in from out of town. Renata had given us the green light that same week. The POA revoked, the notary confirmed fabricated, and traced to a stamp kit purchased under Megan's name. The deed transfer frozen before it ever reached the recorder's desk. I drove over that evening to talk to Trevor privately before her parents sat down at the table, because whatever was about to happen, I wanted my son-in-law to hear it from me directly. Trevor opened the door and I saw it land on his face before I said anything. The tight jaw, the eyes that wouldn't quite settle on mine. He stepped into the doorway, arm braced against the frame. "You can't come in right now," he said. "Not while her parents are here." I stood there looking at the entrance to a house I'd been invited into, being blocked by the husband of the woman who'd forged my signature. I said, "Trevor, do you know what she did?" He said, "Not here, Walter." Megan appeared behind him then, wiping her hands on a towel, and when she saw my expression, she froze in the hall. "Whatever this is," she said, "can it wait until my parents leave?" I said, "No, Megan, it can't. There's a power of attorney with my name forged on it and a fake notary seal, filed back in February." She didn't flinch at first. She said, "I was trying to protect the house, Walter. For all of us. For you and Mom, for Trevor and me. You two weren't getting any younger, and nothing was set up the way it should have been." I said, "I never asked you to protect anything of mine." She said, "You'd have thanked me eventually, once you saw what I was trying to do for this family." I said, "Megan, the notary on that document isn't real. There's no Denise Farrow registered in this state. That's not protecting anyone. That's forgery." She didn't have a response for that. I watched something shift in her face. Not shock exactly, just stillness, the same stillness my hands had found in that parking lot weeks earlier. Trevor looked at her, then at me, and something behind his eyes gave way. Not disbelief so much as a man finally watching a bridge he'd suspected was rotten collapse under him. "That's not what happened," he said. "She was only trying to help us get ahead." I said, "My signature is forged, Trevor. There's no version of helping that includes forging a signature." He didn't have an answer for that either. I turned, walked back to my truck, and called Renata before the engine was even running. "If you found out someone in your own family had done something like this to you, what would you do? Tell me below." Everything after that moved through Renata's office. Not a courtroom shouting match. Megan was charged with forgery and identity theft under state law. Both felony counts, given the forged instrument, involved a power of attorney tied to an attempted transfer of a house valued at over $450,000. She pled down to a single forgery count and received probation, restitution covering our legal costs, and a permanent revocation of her paralegal certification. She was let go from Ashford and Klein within days of the subpoena landing on the firm's desk. The diner closed permanently by September, the debt finally catching up regardless of what she'd tried to do about it. Trevor moved out of their townhouse in August. He and Megan separated, not divorced yet, just living apart. And he's been renting a place near his sister's on the other side of town. He calls me now most weeks, sometimes more. It isn't fixed. Renata told me some things heal slower than a court filing can account for, and she was right about that too. But he showed up for Thanksgiving. He sat beside me instead of across from me, and that felt like something worth noticing. The house is still ours, deed clear, nothing pending against it. Eleanor had the locks changed that same week. Not because she thought Megan would show up with a crowbar, but because, as she put it, a person deserves to feel like their own front door still belongs to them. It's a quiet Sunday evening now, 6 months on. Eleanor's in the kitchen losing an argument with a pot roast recipe. Pete's out on the back porch tinkering with a snowblower that was never broken to begin with, just so he's got a reason to sit out there with me. Eleanor hollers through the window that dinner's 20 minutes out, and that if Pete kills one more patch of her lawn, she's sending him a bill. He hollers back that he'll consider it. I sit down next to him, and neither of us says a word for a while, and that's fine. Some evenings don't need filling.